Hello my fellow riders, this is Chris at Riding Reviews, and today we're going to be talking about how to prepare your bike for winter. Now, as you can probably see, there's lots of vapours coming out of my mouth because it is freezing in here. I reckon it's probably about 1 or 2 degrees. Now, we are in the warehouse at the minute, but Cheap Bikes R Us is renowned for being rather cold in the winter because it used to be an old dairy and it is really thick walls. Loads of insulation in here, so it keeps the heat out and it doesn't get any better. But anyway, I digress, and we are going to talk about obviously how to store your bike for winter. Now, some people like the delivery drivers, Uber, Deliveroo and Just Eat, are going to be riding around in this sort of weather regardless of temperature because it's the way they make their living. But quite a lot of the riders out there are not going to be using their bikes now for a couple of months because it's cold and wet and horrible. This morning I took a bike out for a test ride and the back wheel was sliding all over the place. Visibility was really poor because it was so foggy and it was absolutely freezing. So if I had the choice, I probably wouldn't ride in this sort of weather. I can choose not to because I have a car as well. Some of you have this option, some of you do not. So for those ones who do have this option, I'm going to go through a couple of tips to help you store your bike and make it so that when you do come to use it in a couple of months, that it is ready to do so. Now, my first tip is have your bike serviced. So change the oil. The problem with the oil going into cold temperatures where you leave it for a long period of time is that the oil will build up condensation. Now, new oil will hold less condensation than old oil, and the way to check whether your bike has condensation in it is there will be a white, sort of oily white compound on the bung where you take it off to fill it up, and sometimes in the viewing glass. Now, you can get rid of this if you flush your bike out, get it up to temperature, put the engine flush in it, let it run for 10 minutes and then dump it out. That usually gets rid of it. But if you leave this in for a longer period of time, your oil is not as effective as it should be. So this isn't good for your bike, obviously. And also things like your chains, if you put grease on your chains, they're not going to go as rusty as if you wouldn't, because the grease stops the water from getting into the chain. Also, tyre pressures. Tyres you're going to have to pump up when you come to it again anyway, but it's always good to pump them up because if they go really flat and then they crimp themselves, you can get some wear and tear down the side of your tyre walls, and then again you're potentially going to have to change them. Now, you can get a compound called ACF 50, and this is good if you're leaving your bike externally. Internally, I would say you probably don't need it, but externally, you spray it over your fairings, you spray it over the frame, and you can spray it over your engine. But do not spray it over your discs and your pads and your wheels because it will soak into your into your pads and then make it sort of useless. And we've had it a couple of times where people have just sprayed ACF 50 over everything and the brakes don't work anymore, so you have to take them off and replace them. And it's just a bit of a pain in the arse when you come to your bike in a couple of months and you can't ride it because your brakes don't work. Another good tip is to stick a plastic bag over your exhaust to stop the condensation getting into your exhaust and rotting it from the inside out. This is a good tip, especially if you're storing your bike externally. If you are storing it internally, you won't have too much of an issue, but it can still have an effect. If it's as cold as Cheap Bikes R Us, you're probably better off doing it. Now, another tip is to fill up your petrol tank as much as you can to the top so that you don't have any condensation in your tank. Also, if petrol has got room to expand, it loses some of its, virility, and petrol can go off. And if you're leaving your bike for like 6 months, you might find that your petrol isn't any good anymore and you might have to drain it out and put some new petrol in, or you can put in some performance boost, like liquid moly do a performance boost thing, and that usually revitalises your tank enough, or revitalises the fuel enough so that you can use it again at a later date. So if you are storing it outside, I would always advise getting a motorbike cover. If you leave your bike completely to the elements for several months externally, you're going to find that it's going to rust, and that doesn't matter if it's Chinese, Japanese, Chinese, Hercules, it's going to rust regardless of who makes it. So you always want to get a good quality rain-proof cover for your bike, and remember, don't go out for a ride and then stick your rain cover straight on your bike, because it will just melt, and that's no good for anybody. And my last and final tip is get yourself a trickle charger. A battery, lead acid batteries say they really do not like temperature changes, they do not like the cold, and it will just zap the power out of them. And if a lead acid battery gets to 0% charge or 1 or 2 volt, then it starts to damage the cells, it starts to plate the lead on the internals of the battery, and then sometimes you can't revive them again. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't, but I would say majority of the time you're not going to get them up to the 100% again. They're going to have problems. If you've got a lithium ion battery, is slightly different prospect. They don't like to be stored at full charge, they like to be stored at half charge. So the best thing to do is don't charge it for a little bit. Keep an eye on it. You can get a specific lithium ion charger that will keep it at the correct charge for storage. So say I've got some drone batteries and the full charge on those is 12.4 volts, but they like to be left sitting at about 12 volts because they expand otherwise, and then they become useless, they can become dangerous. Not so much motorbike batteries because they're slightly different technology, but like the LiPo batteries, if you leave them for extended periods of time, they expand and they become useless and potentially a fire hazard, so you don't want that. If you do decide that you are not going to store your bike, one of the most important things as well before you clean your bike, one of the most important things to do before you put your bike away is give it a thorough clean. Especially now when they're starting to put salts on the road, that salty water compound will get onto your bike and it corrodes it. It corrodes your cars, it corrodes your bike, it corrodes everything. So the best thing to do before you put it away is give your bike a really, really good clean. And that's it for my tips for putting your bike away for the winter. If you decide that you are going to carry on riding your bike, remember, tension your chain, do your servicing, put pressure in your tyre. You need to check your tyre pressures at least once a week, because the difference in temperature, hot, cold, hot, cold, hot, cold, is going to reduce the pressure in your tyres. Quite a lot of people are coming in for the services now and they've got half or less of the pressure in their tyres than they should have. This will make it so that your bike isn't as efficient, you don't have as much control over it, and it's not worth the problems for 5 seconds of pressure. So just do it. So thank you for watching my video. If you've got anything to say, comment below, hit that thumbs up or thumbs down depending if you like my video, and remember, subscribe to my channel. It helps me out and it means that you will be able to keep updated to all my latest content. Now up here we're going to do some more tips and tricks and videos, and down here I will do whatever Google or whatever YouTube thinks you're going to like. But remember, hit the subscribe button to stay updated. And as always, ride safe.